And we're live.
Hello.
Right.
Yay.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to organize my screens here. All right. Are people joining? 31, 36.
Yeah, look at that.
Coming in.
They are rolling in.
Let's see if we can get the chat up here.
Right.
Yeah. Happy
Hey, Amy.
National Kindergartner Day to everyone on the call. One of my favorite days. I miss Kindergarten Day. I tend to believe that everyone should still have naps. Matter of fact, I'm in the process of, I'm thinking of starting a new franchise idea. It's a gym, but you don't go to work out. You go there to take a nap. And it's basically a supervised, it's like a locked in environment. You could take a nap. You know, I'm thinking it's going to be called Nap Fit, or maybe a napper size or something, but I'm currently seeking investors.
Ooh.
So
Napper size. I could get behind that. I like
napper,
that.
Napper size, nap fit,
Napper
something
size.
like that. And again, it's just a gym. It's devoted to you going in, you select your pillow, you select your blankie, boom.
Mhm.
What if
Can
you're
we
a very
have
loud
different times?
snorer?
Again, it's all
Ooh.
good. It's going to be, we'll have individual spaces so you can sleep with other snorers. It'll probably be fine. It's going to be good. I think it's going to take off.
I think
All
maybe
the snorers in one room.
Yes.
I think just call it We Nap.
We nap. There you go.
Oh, whoa.
Andrew
You
has
better
just gone
coin
on.
that real
Andrew.
quick.
That's
Yeah,
gonna be the next IPO. You just you wait.
that's right.
All right.
I like it.
People are coming in. We're doing good. So should we dive in? Should we start? Or give it a
Whatever.
little bit more?
No hurry here. It's all good. Content is not going to go away. Seen a lot of common people. I wish kindergartners took naps. Amy, I know, but it was the only thing that I ever got an A in, napping. That was it. Napping and, finger painting occasionally, but that was about it.
Would love to see those finger paints if they're
Look,
if
again,
they're
it's all locked
somewhere.
in. It's all locked down. It's in a museum somewhere back in Kansas.
Oh,
Bacon
convenient.
flavored crayons. What color would they be?
Bacon flavor. That would be, again, kind of a burnt sienna, kind of a dark, kind of a different
I don't know what
little
sienna,
redness.
what color sienna is.
Just say that it's bacon, because they did used to have a bacon crayon. They absolutely did have bacon crayons. I remember that.
Did it have like a white stripe throughout for the fat?
It did not. It did not. But that is not a bad thing. That is not a bad thing.
Definitely not a kosher crayon.
Jessica here from San Diego. I just talked to Jessica recently. Paula from Buenos Aires. Fantastic. Nicolette, who's a believer in naps. I knew we had that in common. Fantastic. Lynn's on the call.
Apparently, Andrew's officially the candy corn man still, or is it Casey? Casey.
Look, I'm
Andrew's
sorry.
the anti-candy corn man.
I don't think you can ever have enough candy corn. I don't see that there's nothing wrong with candy corn. Again,
Nope.
Foods that built America, candy corn's got to be
La
up there.
la.
Got to be right up there.
Okay,
with
can we talk about content now, please?
Coney Island hot dogs.
I just want to say that WeNap.com is available for sale. I'm wondering if I should make it offer.
Wait,
I
is
think
it
now would
somebody
be a
bought
good
it
time.
and it's not just like
somebody's squatting.
Oh,
Someone's squatting on it.
They don't have an asking price, so
someone probably just bought it right
I don't
now.
know.
Yeah,
$10.
we can underbid them there. That's no problem.
Everybody on the call puts $1 in.
we'll have like $20.
Yeah,
exactly.
This will benefit you somehow.
Right, in one way or another.
Yes.
All right, are we doing this?
Yeah.
Let's do this.
All right, so we're gonna switch things up a little bit today. I will be your host instead of Ashley, and that's because the topic today is content, and she is our go-to for content. She's my co-founder and Top Hat Content, and runs all of the operations there, and she's all the brains behind the content courses over at SEMrush. So I'm very grateful to give up my seat and have her share her knowledge with us. So this is the 10th episode, you guys. 10th episode of SEO for Publishers. Right.
Yeah.
Right. 10th episode. Today we're talking about content and content optimization. And with us is Ashley Segura, Casey Marquis, Andrew Wilder, and I, and me, and I, and me.
Or
myself.
Okay.
Fantastic.
And moi.
You're doing
Thanks all for
great
joining
at
us.
hosting.
Thank you. We'll have Q&A at the end as always. Make sure to ask all of your questions in the Q&A section of Zoom so that we can make sure we can track them and answer them for you. We'll also feel free to communicate with us in the chat box. And we'll always, as always, we'll have a replay of this available once we process all of that. We're also live tweeting this webinar at TopHatRank. That's at TopHatRank. All right, let's get right into it. And my first question is for Andrew. Andrew,
hi. Without
saying it depends, what makes content great?
Man, that's such an open-ended question. What makes the great American novel, right?
Oh, I mean, deep.
I think the anything people want to read is great content. Anything that, from our perspective, I think the answer is, to hone that a little bit, is more like anything that answers the user's question, because SEO is question driven, right? People are searching for something, they're seeking an answer. And so anything that answers the user's query or their search intent really well is great content.
Right.
How's that?
Good. So
sure.
We'll take it.
Okay.
So answering what the user is looking for answers to, right?
Yeah.
And with that, we got to talk about topic ideation, right? So like you really need to figure out what your users are looking for. So Ashley, how can you come up with new topic ideas that your users are actually searching for, or your target audiences, not specifically users? They might not be users yet. They're people who you want to attract, right?
Definitely. There's a lot of different ways and a lot of different tools out there to address literally what Andrew's saying. You either want to inform or entertain your audience or potential audience. And so to find a topic that's going to do one of those two things, I highly recommend going into SEMrush's topic research tool. There's also Answer the Public. I'm just not a huge fan of Answer the Public. I feel like they miss some things, but some people love their diagram, and that's the easiest way for them to get topic ideas.
Is it still open to US people, or is it still basically closed down to anyone if you're not in the UK?
It's still in the, you can use it if you're in the in the US. And a lot of people love using it, and by all means, it's great. But I like the topic research tool a whole heck of a lot better because it literally addresses the who, what, when, where, why, how questions people are asking. So if you want to cover all of the questions on the how, it'll populate the most popular search results that have to do with the specific keyword or topic in that question format. And then it'll also show you on the side the top 10 articles that are already published addressing these questions. So not only do you get topic ideas that are literally addressing what people are asking and trying to figure out how to give them the right information, whether that's coming up with a specific recipe or making sure that your recipe post includes all of the FAQ questions that they're going to ask, but it also shows you how the competition, the people, the brands who are already performing great for this topic have their content structured. So you can see if it's videos or bullets, and then that can also give you new topic ideas as well.
Awesome.
Which I will paste over the topic research tool. I saw Andrew just put in the Answer the Public. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So Casey, what is the anatomy of a great blog post? What does the structure of a great blog post look like? Whether it's a recipe post or maybe a cornerstone piece of content.
It's a good question and has a lot of different answers. So I was as a little aside here, we'll drop some content marketing stats on you today. I was reading the other day that there's about 1.75 million published blog posts each day. And that I would say that Arson, Ashley, Andrew, and I, we would probably be considered high users of content, but I had a hard time believing that the average person sees about 18 hours of content every day. Think about that. That's like watching, all of the Twilight movies back to back. I mean, who would want to do that every day? It's crazy talk. But, when we talk about blog posts, when we talk about anatomy or the structure, let's kind of take it slow here. For a regular blog post, we would have things like an introduction. We would have things like a table of contents. We would have things like clear structured headings. Usually we have one H1 in a post, and then we have several subheadings that are H2s. We would have internal and external links, both to related content and then off-site content that adds value and context to the user. Maybe we would use an appropriate schema. For most regular articles, that's just article schema. Fortunately, most blogs and sites code that in for you. If you're a recipe blogger, then of course we use things like recipe schema. Then we have things like breadcrumb schema, which is built in. Maybe we have things like organization schema, which is also built in. We would want to make sure that we have the appropriate schema as necessary for that piece of content. And then, of course, most importantly, for the average piece of content, whether it's a blog post or a longer treatise or a cornerstone post or even a recipe, we'd have clear conclusions. What do we want them to do after they've made it to the end of the post? Is there a specific call to action that we'd want to review? Now, I know we have a lot of recipe bloggers on the call today. When we're talking about putting together an optimal template for a recipe post, I tend to teach a certain template. Now I can show that template to 10 different people, and all 10 different people will do it different ways. And that's totally fine. I was in a conversation the other day on Facebook, and it was kind of interesting because some people just like to attack just because they attack. And one blogger came on there and was like, I don't want to do this because then all the content looks the same, or, I don't like to use this kind of a template because then my content will look like everyone's else. And, I guess I could see some logic to that. But honestly, what I'm seeing in the real world is completely different. I mean, like I said, I can show someone to do something and 10 different people will do it 10 different ways. Maybe they change the order of the elements a little bit. Maybe they've included ingredients or talked a little bit about the ingredients lower on the page, or maybe they've used collages instead of individual steps for their step-by-steps. That's fine. You want to do what you feel is appropriate for you. But when we're talking about things like a recipe post, you want to look at things like a headline. We want to look at edit post information. Do you have published and last updated dates at the top of your post? Are you using breadcrumbs? Are you using jump and print recipe buttons? Have you started with teaser text so that you're selling the user on why this recipe is so awesome? Then we would scroll down lower and we would have things like headings. Why is this recipe so awesome? We want to use subheadings on the page to kind of take the user by the hand and lead them through the post. So maybe we talk a little bit about the ingredients. Maybe we have a nice step-by-step section. Maybe below that, we have expert tips and FAQs. Maybe we have some related recipes, a call to action. Then we have a fully enhanced recipe card. All of that goes hand in hand. Now, with regards to cornerstone content seems to be something that's extremely misunderstood or used incorrectly. A piece of cornerstone content is just a fancy way of saying, this is what I consider my most important stuff. And when we go into Yoast and we pick something as cornerstone content, that's just so that Yoast can remind us it exists so that we can link to it regularly. Maybe that's one of your more important recipes. Maybe that's a treatise on onions. Maybe that's everything you'd ever want to know about candy corn. I mean, I know many of you on the call love candy corn like I do, one of great American food. So hopefully you have a resource on candy corn like I do. But maybe you want to link to that candy corn over and over again. And so that's what cornerstone content is. It's just a piece of content on your site that you've labeled, that you've classified as a way for you to be reminded that that content exists, and you link to it and reinforce it from kind of ancillary or other pieces of content to give it a boost.
Perfect. That's a very detailed and long answer.
Yes, so I apologize for that right now. So good. We're good for now.
It's good. It's good. It's a good answer. Andrew.
Oh, yes. Huh?
If you have a post that's ranking on page 1, but it's not in the top 3 search results, should you leave it or try to update the content? And this is answered without using it depends.
Of course it depends. So I think the first question is that post getting you lots and lots of traffic? If it's not getting you a lot of traffic, or if it is getting you a lot of traffic, the rules are a little different, right? Because if it's not performing in terms of traffic and conversion of traffic to your site, then yeah, you may need to work harder at it. But if it's doing a lot and you'd consider it, like, to use Casey's term, a unicorn, then maybe you don't want to risk breaking off its horn. To push the analogy too far. So I think if you're really careful, if you're really worried about dropping in rankings because you're going to lose a lot of traffic, then maybe you don't want to. But in that case, I'd suggest maybe treating it like cornerstone content and linking to it and working on internal and external links to the post to use that to boost it up rather than editing the post itself. Because anytime you edit a post, it may move. It may move up or it may move down. But generally, I think I think the other thing is, what improvements are you talking about, right? If it's one of your oldest posts and you know you could make it better with newer, you've learned a lot in the last few years and you could make it better content, then yeah, maybe it's worth updating. If it's already pretty good, maybe you don't want to do that little bit. So it depends.
Yeah.
Still did it.
All right. That's a very nice and short and good answer. All right, Ashley, what are some ways to reuse your top ranking content to create even more content?
For publishers in particular, there's a few different strategies that users seem to really appreciate and just kind of amplify the topic that's already doing great. One of which is creating compilations. And so from a publisher standpoint, that can look like a video compilation, putting together snippets of multiple recipes within the same topic, the original topic that did really well. You can also do recipe compilations like organizing your top posts for all of Q1, put your top like 5 or 6 posts, and then you can create a weekly meal sheet out of that, and then have like a grocery shopping list recipe that's a printable. And so they're going to have to go back to each of those posts when they're ready to make that recipe, but then that also gives us a new form of content. So it really depends if you want to create new content pieces from that or just amplify the posts that are already doing really well. If you want to amplify the posts that are doing good, you can do like social media snippets, taking one of the images from that blog post that's doing great, sharing it on social media, the next day sharing another image from that post, the next day sharing another image from that post. Yes, you're talking about this baked chicken recipe 3 days in a row, but you're doing it in a way that's kind of like building up excitement to it. You're not just showing, here's the final product, here's a link to the recipe, good luck, and I hope you enjoy it. You're coming at it from a different angle and trying to rebuild hype to something that already did well. But make sure whenever you do any updates to your top pieces of content, especially when you're trying to reuse content, make sure you make it a featured post. And so it's back on your homepage so you can see any kind of updates that you're making, or if you're creating a brand new piece of content from a similar topic, like baked chicken, for example, if your baked chicken recipe is doing really well, and so you want to try lemon baked chicken or baked chicken Parmesan, since baked chicken is popular, make sure you feature those on your homepage so they really get highlighted so you can actually compare metrics.
Very cool. Okay. Casey, same topic. How often should you publish new content? Or is it better to focus on publishing new content or fixing old content?
Great question. So one of the things to understand, and Google has come out and said that as recently as March 2018, is that content updating frequency is not a ranking factor. We can't just, sites are not viewed as machines that just crank out content, and the more content you crank out, the better you're going to do. Far from it. And I still know a lot of bloggers that are confused by this. Well, I'm going from 3 posts to 4 posts. Why am I not doing better? Well, it's bottom line quality. Maybe there's a quality issue with those 4 posts, and maybe we need to slow the roll, pull things back, go down to 2 posts instead, and up the quality of that existing content. So that's the most important thing to understand, is that we publish content when we can publish content when it makes sense to us. For some people, that's 1 post a week. For some people, that's 4 or 5 posts a week if they've got help. Now, we've had multiple issues where when I've done an audit, and I'm trying to think back to the audit that I did today with the nice blogger, Elisa, who's from Texas, Dallas. And I know I can see it was crestfallen for her on the phone when we were talking about how she was really going to have to go back and start republishing all of her content. That's a very common refrain after you have an audit with me and we've done a content audit, because there's a difference in quality once you've seen it through my lens during the audit as opposed to what they've been introduced over the last several months or years. We know based upon our experience and based upon the many audits we've done, be it myself, Ashley, or Arson, that when bloggers slow down and decide, okay, you know what, I'm just going to go back and republish all of my content, that content hasn't been seen by the vast majority of people currently on their site. It's new content. So understand that you don't have to continue to push out new content that you think and the process while you're also updating and republishing older content. A good example would be Erin over at Erin's Kitchen. When she had her first audit several years ago, I mean, she wasn't even at 100,000 sessions, and now she's well over 2 million, I believe, last time I checked. She did that by literally not publishing one new piece of content for an entire year. She republished everything on her site using the improved template. So that's something that you need to take a personal look at. If you do a content inventory, don't feel that you need to continue to crank out new content if you've got a lot of older content on your site sitting there doing nothing for you. Focus on that first.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Buffer, the social media management platform, they ran an experiment where they didn't create any new content for a month. And I mean, they're a big brand, they're a well-known brand, and especially in the social media industry, like they're relied on for content tips. So not publishing anything new for a whole month was really risky. But what worked so well is before the month came to where they didn't do anything new, they outlined very specifically what they wanted to accomplish. And so when the month ended, they were able to go back, and the posts that they reused and republished, they were able to measure like line by line with the metrics to see what actually worked and what didn't. And it was successful. They could go another month and not create content and still get lots of traffic, still get lots of SlideShare views. So if you're gonna just dig deep into your into the content that you already have, make sure you have a goal before you go into just updating, so you can actually go back and make sure this helped or it didn't help.
Right. Ashley, what kind of word count length should you aim for?
1 to 2 words per post would be safe. That's correct, right, Casey?
Perfect. Let's just end the webinar now.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not, it depends. It does not matter. It is not a ranking factor. So as long as you're covering everything there is to know about baking chicken inside that one blog post, you're good to go. And if you have other posts that help expand on that even more, on how you bake chicken and all of the baked chicken sides, then make sure you have internal links in there. But other than that, you need to be a resource. This goes back to Andrew's very first question. People are coming to you for information. They're most likely coming to you because they need information on a recipe and want to know how to cook something or the oven temperature of something. So don't be vague and just talk about how you discovered the recipe or how it was passed down. Let me know everything there is to know about that specific topic. And if you can do that in 500 words, fantastic. If you need 5,000 for it, best of luck to you writing all 5,000 of those.
Awesome. Casey, should you try to rank for multiple keywords with one blog post? And can you rank for the same keyword across multiple posts?
That is a great question. Hopefully no one is hearing the machine, the sounds that are going on behind me. We're having some work done on the house today. Good times. But yeah, the Copyblogger did some research back in 2019, and the average number one post on Google would routinely pull in 1,000+ keywords, whereas the average media post across all queries and across all niches would usually rank for 400. So yeah, I would expect your post to rank for not just dozens, but hundreds of separate queries, regardless of what you've done. That's just how content works. There's lots of stemming, keyword stemming that goes into your initial focus keyword. So that's not something you should ever really worry about specifically. You can rank for multiple keywords. It's not an issue. Most sites do. I'm going to go ahead and paste over some great examples that we covered in the link building webinar that we did last month. That kind of gives you an idea of these really high quality pieces of content and how they can rank across thousands of different queries. So take a look at those when you can. They're really cool. Now, I think the second part of that question was, can you have two pieces of content rank for the same keyword? And absolutely, and you should expect that. Google will, in many cases, rank two, sometimes as many as 3 or 4 pieces of content for the same query, though we tend to, that's kind of they've kind of lowered that. There's been a deshuffling over the last couple of years specifically. And with regards to basically topical dilution, they don't want the same site showing over and over again. It used to be that we could have a search for Disney and literally 8 results from Disney.com would show up for that query, and that was not good. And that's why we basically have some kind of a quality listing diversification that was happening to provide a better kind of a listing of what's going on for those queries so that there's more resources being pulled in. It's not uncommon now to have 2 or 3 recipes show up and rank for very specific queries, but usually we want to try to minimize that kind of duplication because it can cannibalize your bottom line traffic. If I've got 3 cherry pie recipes on a site, I probably don't need all 3 of those cherry pies. I want to find the one that's the best. And unless I can differentiate the other 2, I might redirect those to the one that's doing the best and not worry about the other 2. So it just depends on the query. It depends on the competition, but that's certainly something that we'd want to be aware of.
Awesome. Let's see, Andrew. What's one of the best ways to keep a reader engaged throughout your content, and not just by putting in the jump to recipe button?
I actually love the jump to recipe button as a user, and I think it for me, so I'm going to speak from my personal experience. I think jump to recipe buttons and jumping down to the recipe is a great way to promote engagement because I don't have to work to find the content I'm looking for. Because when I search for a recipe, I want to know, do I have all these ingredients? Will I want to make this dish? Right? Those are my first 2 questions. Like, because usually I'm hungry for dinner. I want a chicken cacciatore recipe and I'm searching for one of those, right? So I want to jump and find the recipe right away. As soon as I find a recipe that meets those criteria, then I'm going to scroll back up and find out more about it. And I'm going to look for those pitfalls that you talk about, like, hey, make sure you do this with your chicken before doing that, and like all those tips and tricks. So I think making it scannable is really important, but writing great recipes, having really great photos is helpful. You don't want to overdo it. Like, I'm less interested in the recipe, in the photo itself than I am with the contents of the recipe. But I want to see what the dish is. I want to know what I'm considering making, if this is even the thing I'm looking for at all. And then organizing your content in a way that I can answer all of my little individual questions. So having that table of contents at the top, having headers that are clear and easy to read, that aren't stuffed with the keywords over and over again. Google will penalize you for that anyway. So you're trying to preemptively answer the questions I'm about to ask, right? So if you do that in a way that's easy to find and easy to use, I think that's going to keep readers engaged. And don't hit me with tons of annoying pop-ups before I've even had a chance to look at any of your other content.
There you go.
That's another
big one. That's a big one.
Right. Okay. So, Casey, when you're looking at the data, how do you consider a post to be poor content, and what metrics do you look at?
This might be a new term for you, but what we're looking at specifically is a term called consumption metrics. And these consumption metrics are things like traffic, time on site, behavior flow, and Google Analytics. Basically, just bottom line, is there value on this content based upon concrete metrics that we can track in either Google Search Console or Google Analytics? Now, I try to simplify this. I know many of you are aware that I have a t-shirt line called Toddlers and Drunk Adults, patent pending. And that t-shirt line, that's, again, we're going to put bumper stickers, Toddlers and Drunk Adults. And when we're looking at that approach with regards to content auditing, the bottom line metric to us is traffic. If I'm pulling a list of all of your posts on the site and I see that a post hasn't had 1 click from Google in 90 to 120 days, that's the very first thing that I'm going to be looking at is, what is it about this content that has caused no engagement metrics at all with Google? Is it just because it's so far back in the search results it can't garner any impression in clicks? Is it because it's off topic? Is it because you have some cannibalization or dilution happening internally with this, and so it's just competing for finite resources that you don't have? I'm going to look for all of that. I'm going to look at the traffic. I'm going to look at the rankings of the post, whether it even exists. I'm going to look at the conversion in Google, the conversion percentage in Google. Now, the conversion metrics in Google Search Console can be very confusing. So I would tell all of you on the call not to lose much sleep over them. And this is why. If you go in and sort your Google Search Console conversions, you're going to have some batshit crazy numbers, like 27% conversion on a web story. Well, you come to find out that the web story only had 3 clicks. And that's because the impressions are so non-existent that that's what happens when you give conversions too much play. So, you know, the average site, especially for the average query, might have somewhere between 3 and 7% conversion with an actual good quality of click. So wouldn't worry too much about that. But bottom line, what you're going to be looking at is, you know, and especially if you're monetizing, is the content doing anything for you? I know most of you are with Mediavine and AdThrive. You know, have dashboards where you can actually track the breakdown of your individual pages and see how they're monetizing. Well, we know if you've got several pages that are not monetizing well, it's most likely because they aren't garnering any traffic, or they're not garnering any click over traffic from one post to another. And we'd want to identify that content and look for trends. Is it poor content because all you've done is include photos of the finished dish? Is it poor content because there's only 2 paragraphs of content on the page? Is it poor content because you didn't include any headings? You didn't include any discussion on the ingredients? You didn't include any expert tips or FAQs? We have to determine what it is that is causing these poor metrics. And it's different for every site in many cases.
Right. So now that you've looked at the data, you've looked at the metrics, and you've identified the posts that are not performing too well. By the way, you guys use the Q&A for the questions. This way we can track them and answer them, and also provide really awesome resources in the write-up that we do, the recap. So when you guys put them in the chat, they kind of get lost in there. So use the Q&A, please. Okay, so you looked at the data, you looked at all of the metrics, and you've identified posts that are doing poorly. So Ashley, now that you've identified those posts, and this is something that you do very frequently when we do audits, content audits, the topic content. Once a piece of content is doing poorly, what is the best way to go about updating it? Do you need to rewrite the whole post, or do you just go in and figure out what's wrong and fix those little chunks?
And this question is to me.
For Ashley.
Oh, for Ashley. Well, heck, get out of here, Ashley. Go ahead.
You can take a nap real quick, Casey. I'll make it short. This one does fully depend and not in the SEO verbiage, but it really depends. If the content is not doing anything for you, say you've had it on your blog for 2-3 years, it's not meeting any of your goals, you're not getting any traffic, but it's still a topic that you want to be related with, your competition has, you know, your users want to know how to make this X, Y, and Z recipe or need this kind of information, then that's when you're talking about a full rewrite. You need to redo that piece of content because the first round that you did is obviously not successful, and it's had plenty of runtime. It's optimized, but it's not working out. And so before you even start to rewrite it, you need to take a look at who's ranking for that topic or for that search query. See how Google's formulating the search results. Is it all a bunch of product pages that are trying to sell the grill for baking your chicken? Or is it a bunch of other baked chicken recipes? If it's a bunch of other baked chicken recipes, then by all means, go and actually click on them, click on the top performing ones, see how the post is structured. It could be that you either missed a big FAQ question in your post, or you had 5 10-sentence paragraphs and no one could digest the information well. You could have had the right amount of information, but it was structured incorrectly to where your users didn't like it, didn't relate with it. So see what's already been published on the topic. I can guarantee you there's already a ton that's already been published on the topic. I've yet to see a recipe that doesn't have 10 other examples of it already up. And I'm sure that's something that everyone struggles with regularly, is making it unique. But go and see what's already been published to see if it's a structure related issue. On the republishing side of things, which I'm seeing questions come into chat on this, on the republishing side of things, this is not starting from scratch. This is not saying that this original post did absolutely terrible. You did great, but you didn't get the exact goals that you wanted. And so you want to improve the post. That's making minor content updates. And again, I recommend looking at what's already been published and what's ranking to see what improvements that could be, whether it's improving how it's laid out and changing one of the headings, maybe adding, maybe your keyword isn't in the first heading like it should be. Maybe all the competition has videos and you only have images, so you need to figure out how to do some kind of animated content in there. There's lots of different possibilities there, but you definitely don't always want to think, okay, this post didn't work, I'm completely starting from scratch. Sometimes you can revive it by making minor updates to it and then publishing it and distributing it.
Right. Andrew, what's the correct way to go about updating a URL? So for example, if I'm updating a piece of content and it makes sense to update the URL, let's say I had a post about 2020 holidays recipes, and now I need to update it for 2021. What would be the proper way of doing it?
I think if you can avoid updating the URL, that's the best answer.
Right.
So most visitors don't pay attention to URLs. On desktop, you can see it, but on mobile, you probably can't even see it anyway. You're just going to see the domain at the top once they're viewing the post. But once you update a URL, you're basically starting from scratch. From an SEO perspective, Google has to recrawl it. It's a new URL. You're going to reset all your share counts on your social media as well, because those are linked to the exact URL.
Right.
So really, unless you absolutely have to, I recommend not changing the URL. But if you do absolutely have to, then when you change the URL, make sure you set up a redirect, a 301 redirect from the old one to the new one, and make sure it will redirect with just one redirect, so you're not going through a chain of different redirects. Google will eventually catch up on that. But any old links to that post are going to have to go through that redirect. So you're going to lose a little crawl budget, waste a little crawl budget on that. So it's not ideal. So yeah, try not to update the URLs. Is the best way to update URLs, is to not. Right.
Good answer. All right, Casey, what elements make a blog over optimized?
Just unmute myself here really quickly. All right, so when we're talking about a blog post that's over optimized, there's lots of things to look at. The most important thing, of course, to look at is keyword over optimization or repetition. We would be looking at if they just ping the keyword too much. Is the keyword in every H2 on the page, for example? If we've got 8 headings on the page and now the keyword is in each one of those headings, in most cases, unless you're an incredibly powerful site with a lot of backlinks, that can overcome extremely poor on-page optimization. And again, those people exist. And that's the first thing I would look at is making sure that we de-optimize those headings specifically. If I'm trying to rank for bacon wrapped shrimp, I don't want to have 8 H2s on the page and it has bacon wrapped shrimp in there. I'd also want to be using something like an add-on with something like SEOquake.com, which is just a simple browser add-on that allows you to see the keyword density on the page. Is it 2, 3, 4%? I mean, is it relatively high? Compare that metric to the other sites that are ranking on page 1. See if you notice any trends. But excessive keyword repetition and excessive keyword rich headings, very important. We'd also want to look at the keyword rich nature of their internal linking. Are they linking specifically to this page and out from this page with very keyword rich phrases which don't really conform with the title? Usually we want to link internally and externally to the title of the post whenever we can. But if I'm trying to rank a mussels and oysters post or something like that, or a bacon wrapped shrimp, and I've gone into my site and I basically ranked bacon wrapped shrimp from all over the place, you could overdo it. Because you'd also want to be looking at, are there other related or complementary keywords that I could use to vary the anchor text? If I want to improve a page for bacon wrapped shrimp, I'm not going to link over and over again to the page for bacon wrapped shrimp. I'm going to go into Search Console and find all the other complementary keywords that the post is ranking for, and I'm going to vary my anchor text naturally, internally and externally. There might be 20, 30 different keyword phrases that include bacon or wrapped or shrimp, and I want to vary the keyword phrases accordingly so I don't over optimize that. So I would be looking at all that information specifically. I'd also want to be looking for keyword stuffed footer content. I'd also want to be looking for keyword stuffed content on the sidebar. I'd also want to be looking at the alt text specifically. Have I done alt text correctly? Does my alt text visually describe this to someone who cannot see it, or did I just repeat some focused keywords as the alt text and not think anything about anyone accessing my site with a visual disability? That's what we need to really think about, making sure that we dial that stuff back. Also, I'm seeing a lot of bloggers these days use captions below their photos. Nothing wrong with using captions if you add value to the user. If you're using captions to repeat the keyword phrase, that's not a correct use of captions. Captions are there to communicate information as supplementary to the experience of the user looking and addressing the content. That would be something like a photo credit. That would be a fact. That would be something like, maybe there's a string of photos telling you to make something, and maybe you specifically say, maybe that's a good chance for you to use a pro tip and say, oh, by the way, make sure that, you have a glove on before you pick this up, or something along those lines. But if you're using captions to horribly inflate the keyword density on the page, or just to repeat the keyword, that's probably something you want to look at and dial back with regards to over optimization.
Just stop doing it. Just don't do it. Ever. Stop it. Stop it now. Ashley, if you have a specific dietary or type of lifestyle cooking content, let's say keto recipes only, or potato soup recipes only, do you need to include the word keto in the title and body of every recipe?
Yes, you should. If all you write about is keto recipes, naturally things like information architecture and your category structure should reinforce that you write about keto recipes and only keto recipes. But lots of times you're found from, say, Pinterest, and it's from a specific keto recipe that you have. If you never put keto in front of stuffed bell peppers, people who are on a keto diet would have never clicked on that pin and would have never found your website that's home to all these other recipes, all these other keto recipes. So if you have a very specific niche, such as a dietary restriction, and that's all the kinds of recipes that you do, it's really important and helpful for the user if you put that into your title, if you put that into some of your headings, as long as it makes sense with the context of your headings.
Right. Okay, and then we have the last question for Andrew. After that, we'll go through the Q&A. We have plenty of time. Andrew, what are some of the best ways to optimize your images? Any plugins that you'll recommend?
I do have some plugins to recommend.
Ooh.
My favorite plugin is Short Pixel, like really low pixels. Another popular one is Imagify. In my tests, Short Pixel outperformed Imagify a little bit, but they're both excellent. So basically the way these plugins work is when you upload a picture to your WordPress site, those will then optimize the images that you've uploaded. But WordPress also makes a whole bunch of thumbnail images or smaller versions after you upload an image, and it's going to optimize all of those as well. So that's why I recommend having the plugin and not just making sure your images are optimized before uploading. But you do want to make sure your images are pretty well optimized before you upload. So our general recommendation is to size your images to 1200 pixels wide before you upload. They can be however tall you need them to be to maintain the proportion, but 1200 pixels wide, and set the quality level when you export from your photo editor so that the images are in the 200 to 300 kilobyte range. That's not an exact science. You're going to need to find a quality setting that works for you and your aesthetics. And the more detail and texture that's in a picture, the more kilobytes it's going to need. That's sort of the nature of JPEGs and the way the compression works. But if you're typically in the 200 to 300 kilobyte range before you upload it, and then Short Pixel is going to squeeze out some more kilobytes there, and then your images are going to be nice and fast and should still look good. The defaults on Short Pixel are pretty good. I do like lossy mode. That's the strongest mode. If you're super picky and scrutinizing every pixel, you might not be happy with it. But for those of you who do that, I'd like to remind you that most of your visitors are on a screen that is this big, and they don't care nearly as much as you do. So once it's shrunk down to this size, that might not actually be visible. So make sure you're not looking at like the full size and critiquing it, but look on a phone and look to mimic your user's experience to make sure you're actually getting it as fast as possible. The other thing I'd throw in the mix is you want to make sure you're lazy loading your images, which means that they don't all load at the same time when the page loads, but instead they load just in time. So as you're scrolling down, the images load one at a time when they're needed. So that really helps get the rest of your content to load quickly right away. There is sort of a native lazy loading built into WordPress. It's not great, but it works. But if you use WP Rocket, which is our favorite optimization tool in general, that has an option to lazy load images. If you want a free version, the A3 lazy load plugin is a great option as well.
Cool. Lots of information there. Obviously, all of it is going to be in the recap. We'll include the links and all of that good stuff. Let's open up to Q&A. I'm gonna read off these questions. I'm gonna start at the top. This one's got 2 thumbs up, coming from Lauren. I'm curious about the process of republishing. I know how to decide whether or not to update or republish. She's just not sure of the technical steps for actually republishing a recipe. Who wants to take this? Casey?
Yeah, sure. So depends upon if you're using a plugin. In most cases, you can use a plugin like Revision Manager, TMC, which is a strong candidate to use, or you can use something like Revisionize. Tends to be a little bit buggy, but it depends. Some people tell me it works perfectly for them every time. Or you can even use the new Yoast duplicate content plugin, and basically it allows you to clone your existing post. We make all the changes we want for the clone. Then we go ahead and combine that clone with the existing post, and it goes live at a date of your choosing. You can either have it go live immediately with all the changes, republishing at that date, or you can schedule it at a date in the future and have those changes again combined seamlessly and go live at a future date. I think both methods are the way to go. I know a lot of people like to make all the changes in an external document, then go in and paste them into your existing post and then click update, and then some of them go in and change the date on it. It's fine. It's not going to kill you. It depends upon what your workflow is, honestly. As Ashley said, it's usually good if you're making substantial changes, and that's, again, anything involving adding sections, not just updating a photo. You probably want to republish because you want it to hit your RSS feed anew. You want to feature the post on the homepage again. There's some benefits for that. And for most everyone else, maybe an update is just fine. When you're updating a post, you're still pinging Google. Google's going to come back, take the whole post, recrawl it, and you're going to be just fine. So it really is what you're most comfortable doing.
So Chrissy has a question that's relevant to what you're answering right now. When doing major updates to old content, is there any SEO difference between using benefit to using a plugin like Revision Manager versus just updating the content directly on the post?
No, not really.
And then
republishing
it with today's date, right?
Not really. I mean, Chrissy, if that's easier for you to do, that's fine. I mean, I think the Revision Manager is more for those of you on the call that realize, oh man, I have a lot of content to update and republish, because this allows you to do it at scale. We're scheduling out content updates over a period of time. So I can start working today on 5 or 6 posts and then schedule them to go live days and weeks down the feed. And I know a lot of bloggers have been very successful. I know Erin's with Erin's Kitchen did that for a long time, where she had posts ready to go live months in advance based upon using Revision Manager or Revisionize specifically. It really depends upon your content pipeline, so to speak. If you've got a lot of content to update and republish at scale, doing them one at a time is going to slow you down, especially if you're going to say, okay, I'm going to do this post here, and then boom, we're going to republish. I'm going to do this post, I'm going to republish. Whereas you can literally revisionize 2-3 posts at a time and work on them when you have time and schedule them out when they're done.
Right.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
It's important to note, because these republishing questions, the word date keeps coming up, and updating the date, and when you should update the date. Any evergreen content and holiday content, when you make an update, you definitely want to change that date. So it's now 2021. Your 2020 Mother's Day brunch recipes don't look as good as 2021 brunch recipes do. So make sure you don't just change the date to be timely. Make actual updates. They can be really minimal. Make actual updates to the post, then have the date changed and reflected so it's timely.
And that also brings up another good point. I know there's a lot of people who think that, well, Google likes fresh content, so I'm just going to update the post to change the date. We just don't want to do that, and that's an old trick that Google ignores. So if anyone is telling you that you should do that, or you should do that at a scale, you should just run, not walk in the opposite direction. Complete waste of your time. It's also important to try to think, again, when we talk about evergreen resources, let's say, and using Ashley's example of, would you use Mother's Day, didn't you? Use Mother's Day brunch recipes. We should have, let's say you had a roundup. We would never have the URL say Mother's Day brunch 2021. We would just have the URL say Mother's Day brunch recipe or Mother's Day brunch, so that we could republish that URL every year without having to worry about any bias that might be in the URL itself, okay? And it's the same with anything that has a date, Christmas recipes or holiday menu for Thanksgiving. We just have static URLs that we republish every year so that that URL can accumulate long-term signals. That's the best approach. Right.
Because the title, the heading, all of that can convey
the current dates. Yes.
Right. Andrew.
I think it's also important to note that there's two dates that we're talking about in WordPress. There's the published date, and then there's the last modified date. And there was a question about that in the chat as well. So the published date is the public-facing date it goes live, and that is where it is in the list of posts, because all the posts in WordPress are reverse chronological, right? So the most recent are at the top of the pile, and then you go back down. Last modified date doesn't change the published date, but it's when you last changed something else on the post. So if you're just updating a post, you're going to leave the published date the same, and you're going to change the content in some way, and you're going to hit update, and that changes the last modified date. And someone was asking about limiting the modified date. So if you don't want to show that it was updated, and you don't want to publish that information, you can install the limit modified date plugin. You're still updating your content. It's still going to ping Google and tell Google, hey, recrawl this because I've updated it. But that changes it. That prevents the date from being changed. When you're talking about republishing, that's changing the publication date to something newer. So like if you've got your Christmas post, Christmas recipes, and you last shared it in December 1st, 2020, well, when this year comes around, you're going to republish it to December 1st, 2021, which at that moment, when you republish it to that, it's going to change the published date and the last modified date to be December 1st, 2021. So the evergreen content that kind of comes around, you're going to want to bring to the front. Some content you also don't want to republish stuff out of season, right? So if it's Christmas, you don't necessarily want to be posting your July 4th barbecue recipes as new content. But if you want to update it, you can update it then, and nobody's going to notice. And then when July comes around next year, it's going to be already freshened up. So thinking about seasonality and what you want to focus on as if it were new content and not, can help inform your workflow and what you should be working on at what time.
Right. Okay, a few more minutes left, and I see some comments on the chat. We always answer all of the Q&A questions, even if we don't get to them during these live webinars. We answer them in the recap. Okay, so two questions that are very similar. One from Tammy, one from Beth. Tammy writes, if my best post still isn't in the top 3 ranks, is it better to leave it or update it if I know it could be made better? Now, Beth has a similar question, and she's saying that she has a post ranking highly, but it was written a long time ago, and she doesn't have targeted. She doesn't have a targeted lead magnet, nor any targeted products to sell with that post, and she'd love to update it for it to make money for her. So, what would be the best way of handling that?
Well, I'll just jump in for Beth here. Beth, hopefully you're using something like WP Recipe Maker, or I think Create is now database driven. The first thing I would do is go into that recipe cards, make sure that it has clear recipe notes, that you fully enhanced all the recipe attributes there, and that you've added your affiliate links. Do you have an equipment list there? Add an equipment list. Make sure there's some affiliates, especially if your goal is to monetize that post. Let's do it in the recipe card, which goes live immediately. We never have to touch the post. That's the first thing we'd want to do if we're trying to monetize that post a little bit more effectively.
Right. Okay. So I think
Andrew's got
it. Beth just added a comment that it's not a recipe. So
right.
It's not a recipe. What do you do?
Well, you got to make the decision. You could use something like the limit modified date plugin, which will allow you to minimize things like the modified date schema being pushed out, which is a signal that Google could use to not recrawl the sitemap and not revisit this post needlessly. You could go in and make some changes, add some affiliate links within the content itself, add some kind of an actual email embed or some kind of a convert form, not ConvertKit. They're the devil. But anything else, MailerLite, maybe Mad Mimi, maybe Convert Pro, anything is better than ConvertKit. Anything. And just add a lead into the post and go that
route. Andrew, Jenny is asking, should all texts and descriptions of photos always be filled out? What is the proper way to list all text and descriptions for SEO purposes?
Sure. Well, first of all text should not be viewed as for SEO purposes. It may impact some SEO things, but alt text is there for accessibility. So that's the primary way you should be thinking about it. So in general, alt text should be used to describe the purpose of the image or describe the image itself. So if it's a photo of your recipe in a post, you should describe the image to someone who cannot see it. So could be a slice of cheesecake on a blue plate with a fork, or I'm sure you could wordsmith something better than that. But the idea is a concise description of what the photo is. So it's important to fill alt text out for accessibility. And actually, maybe we can link to, I've done a few talks on accessibility in general, which maybe we can add in the show notes. But then from an SEO perspective, it's okay to add your keywords in there. So if it's a chocolate chip cheesecake, let's say, you can say chocolate chip cheesecake recipe, or a chocolate chip cheesecake, a slice of chocolate chip cheesecake on a blue plate, maybe. However, you don't want to overdo it, because anybody who's using a screen reader is going to hear that spoken out. So if you keyword stuff every single image is alt text, that's going to get really annoying really fast. So don't be obnoxious about it. And honestly, I don't think it's even that necessary if you're using your keywords in the rest of the post. Google's really good at understanding the context. So, just in the same way you wouldn't want to keyword stuff your heading tags, you don't want to keyword stuff your alt text. And again, it all comes back to think of your user. And in this case, the user can't see the image, so you have to describe it to them.
Bianca is asking if I'm using the Yoast plugin and have been updating content to ensure that I'm achieving green light for both SEO score and readability score, is that a good measurement of making sure that the blog posts are optimized? And we've said this before, don't chase that green light. But who wants to deep dive into that? Casey, you're muted.
Casey, you're muted.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to say that, but you've answered your own question, Bianca. Where we're getting into trouble is the bloggers who chase the green light in Yoast. It's honestly going to lead to a lot of over optimization. You just don't need to do it. Don't worry about it. Don't try to put your keyword phrase in the beginning of a sentence. It's extremely unnatural. People don't talk that way. Don't try to put your keyword in every heading on the page. Again, it's unnatural. It's over optimization. We've covered it repeatedly, and we've seen this effect, because it's going to affect the smaller bloggers more profoundly. And those are the people that are usually trying to get to green on Yoast right out of the gate, because you don't know better. So I would just urge you not to. We want to write to the user whenever we can. Yoast is just a tool. I have a lot of people just turn off the suggestions completely, but just write for users and don't try to stuff your headings with the keyword phrase. And when you're writing your descriptions, especially, ask yourself, what looks good to you when you're navigating the internet, when you're looking at these descriptions? People don't just list the keyword and then do a hyphen and then talk about the post. That's not a good meta description. People don't say strawberry cheesecake, awesome, and then hyphen, and then talk a little bit about the strawberry cheesecake. They write more conversationally, and that's something that Yoast has not been able to learn. You need to be writing more conversationally as well. Sell the user on why your recipe or why your post is the best it can be, and you'll be surprised at how better you'll do and not worry about getting to green.
Good answer. Anybody else wants to chime in on that?
He covered the main point. Just don't follow
in
it.
depth. In depth.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And with that, we have a lot. We have 30 open Q&As. We're going to make sure all of them get answered. This is going to be an interesting recap that we'll put together. We're going to make sure all of them get answered. The next episode of SEO for Publishers is about WordPress plugins, and we're going to do it on Tuesday, May 18th at 2 p.m. Going to drop a link real fast for everyone to register for that one. And then we'll obviously send out an email blast when the recap post is up so that all of you can come in and take a look and read all about it. I want to thank all of our panelists, Ashley, Andrew, and Casey. And I want to thank all of you for attending today. You guys are awesome. We love you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next month.
See you next month.
Bye.